Joel, thanks for joining us. We're really excited to have you today. We're going to be doing a session today pretty much entirely on innovation within the health system. So super excited to have you. Before we get started, why don't you give us a little background on yourself, your current role, maybe some of your background in the healthcare industry would be great.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Rich. So thank you for the invitation. Joel Vengco, Senior Vice President and Chief Information Digital Officer for Hartford Healthcare. And I've been in healthcare IT, for probably over 25 years now. It's actually 24 years. So not that old, but 24 years. And really, I started in healthcare IT kind of serendipitously. And I say that because, I was in medical school at the time. This was the early 2000s. And, my then mentor, who happened to be the chief scientific officer of one of the early HIT firms, Eclipsys, invited me back to Eclipsys that summer to start working on my thesis, because I had this idea that perhaps my thesis could be about disease progression using big data. So I was in an MD PhD program as a bit of background, but it was my third year, and that, it was my time to really look for a thesis. And he said, come down to Eclipsys, and we've got 1,200 customers. We've got this electronic medical record and some revenue cycle stuff, and you'll find your data in no time, right? And I was a little dangerous at that point in time with regards to like SQL and SAS, and so I knew how to get around anyway databases. And at that time, things were just sort of getting off the ground in terms of true sort of data warehousing, at least in healthcare, and analytics. And so I cracked open my first databases, just long story short, and I absolutely found nothing that was of use. Like, medications were in the gender fields, gender was in the name fields. There was no codification. Everything was unstructured. And for me, that was like some sort of awakening, it was really eye-opening for me. And that summer was kind of a period of epiphany for me, I'd say. I'm a creative guy. I love doing things or creating things out of nothing. And it just felt like this was sort of the calling that I was looking for. And that kind of, propelled my data journey. Since then, I've been really chasing data. And every move I made and every career choice I took was really in hopes that I could, acquire the data somehow. Because at that point in time, I really felt that if we could control the data, harness the power of the data, and this was in the early 2000s again, that we could solve some really hard problems in healthcare. And I know that's been a thesis for most, but I just saw such an opportunity. But there was no technology that was really allowing us to collect that data in an easy manner. Compute power was not where it is today. Certainly the analytics capabilities were not there. People didn't really care about collecting data. So it was an uphill battle. But that inspired me to really sort of do the things that I ended up eventually doing through the course of my 20 plus year career in health IT. So, while I'm the Chief Information and Digital Officer, which most sort of correlate to technology, hard technology, sort of fundamental technology, I really focus on that information piece and how that information from the data that we collect really creates insight and knowledge. And that has been the core to my journey.
And from my perspective, you're probably one of the most or foremost thought leaders in innovation from within a health system, right? A totally different type of animal than innovating within, a startup or other areas. And so, I'd love to hear from you, some of your best practices, some of the things that you found successful innovating from within a health system.
I mean, I guess you could somewhat say that I love to punish myself, because it's harder to actually innovate inside of, these large organizations, and these organizations that have been so traditional and the way that they function. I mean, medicine is so steeped in tradition and history. That's hard to change, right? That's change management, kind of, I think, at its most difficult, perhaps. So it's truly moving an iceberg. when I was actually, I'll sort of rewind back. I think what inspired me to do innovation from within was when I was at GE, the team that I was working with, and the mission that we had was to create this population health management platform. This was like in 2010, 2011. So needless to say, it was still very early in the population health journey, but we were really innovating and creating something that really now it's just sort of starting to really take hold, right? Everything from patient engagement to, predictive analytics to data integration and harmonization and interoperability to true population management of cohorts of patients. But, there was one instance where we were at a hospital or health system in New York, and we were presented this platform, and we had been working with Geisinger on it, actually, and it wasn't truly, we weren't really working like day in and day out at Geisinger. We were getting their feedback. We had some of their knowledge, and so it was still sort of working and innovating outside in many ways. But we get to this place in New York, this health system in New York, and the CIO says to me after the presentation, that was fantastic. It was really great. And it's really, forward thinking. There's a lot of really great things there from a population health perspective, but it's not going to work for us. We don't look like Geisinger. We are who we are. This was Jack Both, by the way, at Montefiore, who was just a great guy. But he said, we are who we are, and there's some uniqueness that I think you're not capturing. And it would have been better if we worked together to create that solution. So many other problems to address to the lead up to that, but I just don't see it working for us. And so it was then where I thought, gosh, if I was ever in a health system, to be able to solve these problems internally, maybe bring partners in, like a GE when I was there, and work on solving problems that sort of broadly impact health systems, and use the resources inside of the health system to really come up with a solution. So that's what I ended up really sort of focusing on when I had my first CIO job. Was I know we can be brilliant with the basics, and we can fundamentally make the infrastructure strong, but how do we really solve problems? How do we really impact the organization? There are a lot of problems in healthcare. So that was really the sort of the basis for innovation, was that forgive me because I was on the vendor side too, but I don't think the vendors necessarily always have the target in mind. Yeah. It's like, they're trying to give us a solution for a problem that we may not even know exists yet, which is what I was doing when I was creating the population health management system. The problem didn't exist, at least at that time. It didn't, in the form that it was at that time. But now it truly exists. There are other problems that exist. So it's really about solving problems, what I call passionate problems within these healthcare systems, that I think creates really significant and impactful solutions, meaningful solutions. And that's what we sought to do.
That's amazing. I love the phrase passionate problem. We were talking recently. You kind of brought that up and stuck in my mind as something that we'll definitely reuse that one, because it's a good way to kind of prioritize, right? Because I imagine in a health system, there's infinite number of problems you could tackle, right? So, kind of focusing on the passionate problems, those that are really going to have an impact. Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Healthcare is mission driven. It's passion. It's full of people that are passionate about the, this kind of work.
Yeah.
So we felt that was a great, we talk about it, but it really is I think a great way to describe, what's the highest priority, what's the most important thing that we need to do.
And, given, especially now where things are going and how important data is within, innovation entirely, what are some of the problems you're seeing these days with innovating around data within a healthcare system?
Yeah. We are at a place now that we're at a crossroads, right? We've got compute power that we've never had before. We have some level of interoperability. There are a lot of folks that are focused on, standards, creating those kinds of interoperability, scenarios. I think that the vendors are a bit more keen on making sure that they're codifying data that's going into the systems. But I think the biggest problem still, which, looking back on my 20 plus year, journey, is still making sure the data is usable, that we're able to harness the data, that the data is fit for use. Right now in addition to the things that we were talking about even 10, 15, 20 years ago, like, it's unstructured, not codified. Now we've got things like equity, right? Which is important. And that's another layer of a challenge that we have to make sure we focus on, particularly with AI, among us, right? So I think the one major fundamental problem still is curating, managing, ensuring that the data quality is high. And there are a lot of challenges there, as you know, right? There's a lot of source data everywhere in our health system. How do you bring it all together and, connect it to each other, harmonize it? I think that's a fundamental problem. If you can't solve that problem, or if you can't, address that problem, you're going to have a lot of issues innovating. You'll have a lot of issues with analytics, obviously, because you need the truth, and the data is true, right? But the junk in, junk out, data is only as good as you put into it. So, I think that's the challenge for innovation. And then the other thing is, let's assume that we get the data right. Now, there's what I love to refer to as data liquidity, and what that really, for me, is defined as is free-flowing data that people can access that data easily, and by the way, in a manner that is it's data liquidity is like being able to access the data with guidelines and guardrails and the policies and all the things that you need to ensure that it's being consumed in a way that you'd want it to be consumed, and you are able to manage it and monitor it, right? Because as we all know, that's another issue that we all have to deal with.
Sure, that governance side of things.
The cybersecurity. I mean, our healthcare data is some of the most, sought after data in the black market, right?
Yeah.
So
I think as you get into AI as well, it's going to even, become more important to have those governance guardrails around data use and data consumption, because a lot of these models, can be very black box at times. And so making sure that, there's very good understanding about what's able to go in and out. It's a very interesting space that we're playing in right now. And also, you mentioned equity and some of these other things. I think there's some really exciting things that are happening around collection of social determinants of health and things like that really can be oftentimes as impactful on understanding a population's health and access and things as what you're getting out of the EMR, right? Yeah. So it's a pretty interesting time in terms of being able to have more tools to collect that data.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day when I just started this journey, we were trying to figure out ways to have clinicians actually collect the data. To your point, and I mean, we still have the cut and paste issue, no question about that. But back then they wouldn't even cut and paste at times; they would just not even document. Mm-hmm. But now it's really about figuring out ways to have folks enter quality data, high quality data, so that there's there's much less processing, post hoc, if you will.
Right. So for those that are listening that are, kind of interested in setting up a center for innovation, right? What does it take? What advice would you have for, a CIO or a chief digital officer that's really, trying to set something like this up within their health system? How do you get past kind of the cold start problem? What initial things would you advise them?
First, it's all about the culture. What I realized when I was starting my first innovation center, in my first CIO role, it was, I convinced the COO and the CEO and the CFO that this was a good idea. And the way that I did that, I said, was basically, hey, look, there are a lot of smart individuals outside of our organization. We've got a lot of smart individuals, but there are a lot of, individuals outside of our health system who can help us solve a lot of our problems. And maybe there's a way for them to be able to harness and utilize our data and our environment and help us solve those problems. And I thought it was a really interesting idea at the time. And so, We talked about it and we discussed it, but I realized then and there that it was really first and foremost about the culture. Like, do you have a culture that's willing to, to innovate, or maybe if we take that a step lower, that's willing to actually learn or fail fast. Healthcare has been, we're so focused on getting it right the first time because of just the environment that it is. Like, you don't want to have a medical error. You don't want to, make a mistake. So that's part of the culture. But you have to change that mindset. You have to have a sort of a growth mindset, no doubt about that. So that's sort of the first thing is ensure that you've got a culture, or you can influence a culture that wants to learn fast, fail fast, have a change and growth mindset, right? The second is really about, identifying champions around you who have the same mentality, who believe that they could do better, that they could improve, their the way that they work. They can really solve their problems at work, right? And if you get a coalition of those individuals, that enables you to sort of create, an innovation center or a center for innovation or a group of innovators. You don't want to go up a mountain by yourself. Man, you need a group of people to help you climb. And so I think that's another piece of this is that, find like-minded people who can, and particularly clinicians, because if you're doing this with just technology, it becomes a technology play, and it's not that easy. The third I'd say is find external partners who are ones that can really help you execute, who could fund certain programs or projects, who can lift up certain areas like, maybe you have a data problem, or maybe you've got, an application development problem or lacking skills in that area. But a partner in that area is going to be very helpful to you, because we all know in healthcare, health IT, there's not a lot of money. It's not free flowing. I mean, there's some that are out there that have, double-digit margins, but most of us are in single-digit margins close to zero, right? And so it's hard to stand up something that seems like it's outside of your, your core competency, right? So I'd say those are sort of a few of the things that I would start with, and then you need to have a framework for innovation. For us, it was identifying a passionate problem, because you want to be able to focus on a problem to solve, and then have a process to say, okay, this is how long it's going to take for us to actually solve that problem, or at the very least get close to solving that problem. And so having a framework is really helpful, because, as I like to say, you don't want it to be a perpetual science experiment. You want it to have some sort of beginning and end, and you can say, we want to continue it, or we want to sort of, jettison and go on to the next. But I'd say those are some of the things that, just to start, would be very, very useful.
And double clicking a little bit on the, kind of inspiring the team, and then kind of engaging physicians, anything you can share there that just, because that's got to be the crux of a lot of this, right? Is just, kind of the passionate problem, I'm sure, is inspiring. But then, how do you kind of merge tech and clinical teams together in a way that's super productive?
It's, again, it boils down to a shared understanding of the problem. And I think, in my first sort of iteration of the Innovation Center, it really was seen as a technology play. Like, that's Joel's sandbox, right? And so we needed to change that mindset to saying, this is our environment to solve problems that we feel are important. And once you do that, then you bring in, then you're able to draw in people who live this day in and day out. I mean, they have a ton of problems that they need to address. What you have to help them do, and that's where the framework comes in, is help them identify what's the most important one. Because they can give you, the flavor of the day, but what you really want is for them to give you sort of the problem that's going to maybe solve a lot of the things that they've seen symptomatically have created issues for them and or for their teams. So I think the problem to rally around is really the the thing that you need to identify, and that draws people in, and it inspires people to work outside of of their day, because they're inspired to solve that problem. And these are people that love to solve problems, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
So.
And maybe think about maybe the next year or two, right? What are some of the problems and then associated technologies that you're most excited about?
Everybody's talking about AI and Gen AI. And I do believe that's like our next 1 to 2 years that we're going to be focusing on. How do we truly leverage this? There are a lot of things that are risky in healthcare, and the challenge that we have is, I think that the things that are the riskiest are probably the ones that have the highest value. However, there are things that are, low risk and probably have some decent value, some good value, right? Like, for example, healthcare has generated, or we've created rather, a lot of data ourselves. Like, we've created policies in HR, we've created knowledge assets for the applications that we're training our clinicians on. We've written articles and papers and filled our websites with, clinical tips and, clinical information that largely kind of, gets filed away virtually somewhere else. And the search engines that we've put on top of them are hardly useful, or actually unuseful in many ways, right? And I can say that because I own, many of those search engines, or inherited them, I'd say. And so, I think one major problem to solve, and I'll go back to actually another part of this, the problem to solve is really, oftentimes it's about the work that you want to get done. And it's sort of, I don't know if you've read that, the book by Clayton Christensen, which I love. It's, Competing Against Luck. And I always talk about that book because it's just so fundamental in the way that it sort of focused the problems to be solved. It's really about the work that needs to be done. And when I think about our colleagues at the health system, a lot of it is searching, hunting, and pecking, and looking for things like, how do you order a medication, or, can I wear on Fridays open-toed shoes? Oh, by the way, I'm a male, probably not, but those are things that you can't really easily find, right? So lots of knowledge, lots of content. That's one of the things that generative AI can be really good at, right? Retrieval augmented generation, RAG, that approach using Gen AI focused on a specific set of data that you could train on is safe, and I think could be very useful creating an agent for our colleagues. It's unknown whether or not that's going to make them more efficient or effective, but I feel like there's, at least for me personally and some of my teammates, it's like, you're spending, I don't know, maybe a couple hours searching for stuff oftentimes. But what if you could ask the agent, the Gen AI agent, to give you something that you're looking for very quickly?
Yeah.
So I think those are some of the areas that I think are the first to go. And of course, there's some other areas that, Gen AI and traditional AI, I think can help us with. I love IR, VR, AR, the augmented reality side, virtual reality. I think there's a lot of potential there. And I think we're going to see a lot more, particularly as it intersects with data and higher compute power and AI just overall. I mean, it's going to be a crazy world. Like, once you make it more 4D and sort of, more sensory, gosh, we're in a whole different situation. So
Competing Against Luck, by the way, is one of my favorite books. I, in a former company, had our whole executive team read it, right? For the purpose of, coming back to what are the jobs to be done, centering around that. I think it's just such an important framework, and so many great examples in that book that, kind of bring that to life.
Yeah.
So that great concepts. The other one is like, I totally agree with you. And I think that Gen AI can really be a great catalyst to solve this data liquidity problem that you talked about, right? So getting data that's more accessible, out into the organizations, at your fingertips, a really great use case for Gen AI. And I've said for a while that, there's a lot of talk about interoperability. But interoperability doesn't equal data liquidity, right? Interoperability gets data from here to there in an interoperable format. But to get data into a truly kind of, format that can be consumed by a human, it's a whole nother layer, right? That I think oftentimes we kind of fumble the ball at about the 10-yard line and, bringing data to the actual user. So a lot of great applications for AI and getting that data there.
I agree with you. I think one of the things that, you and I have talked about in the past is, even some of the basic blocking and tackling of data, like tagging data, defining data, unifying some of that data. I think those are really amazing or interesting applications that we could use Gen AI for sure. I think to your point about data liquidity, imagine a time where a consumer can ask for certain things that exist in a platform, knowing that there's, obviously there's data liquidity already kind of in place. And so, asking for it to be consumed in a specific way, in a specific format, or, packaged in a way that, the consumer wants it, that's a wholesale different approach. Like right now, I believe we're going to get to data liquidity, but only to the place where I'm going to say, here's the Chinese menu of things that I can offer you and how you're going to consume it. But you have to consume it in this form or fashion. But it's not like, there's not a lot of customization, which we want to get away from to a certain degree. But at some point, you have to get to a place where you can create some level of customization or, choose your own adventure so that you can consume it in a way that, whatever is the newest technology at that point in time is going to be able to actually leverage it and use it in more sophisticated ways. I don't want to talk about quantum computing, but we're going to get to some place where it's just we're not going to be able to achieve what we need to achieve with that if we can't create true data liquidity. So,
yeah, absolutely. What do you see as some of the biggest headwinds for those in your position and kind of for the industry in general?
There's a lot of data, and data storage, especially some of the more complex data, images, can be very expensive, right? And so, I think we've largely solved the GPU problem, early, but the consumption problem may become, at some level, inhibitive to some of those that are trying to leverage cloud and compute power. So hopefully that's not going to be the case. But, I do think a lot of the headwinds are going to be about, spend and expense and cost. And then, we're not going to be able to, as a health system, truly leverage our data to innovate or solve problems. We may have to rely on others, but which may be okay, I suppose. But I would love to continue to have the abilities that we're seeing now in terms of innovation stay within the health system. And we already talked about this, but I do think that the data itself is still a big barrier. The vendors are doing better at enabling us to own our data, but they're still far from what I would consider to be, optimal.
Yeah.
There's legislation, obviously, that's trying to stop or preclude data blocking, but they're finding ways to, still charge us for getting access to our own data. And I don't mean when we put it into the cloud. I mean, when it's still inside of the vendor platform. So I think that's some of the, the headwinds. I'd say probably the last one still is healthcare is better in terms of its ability or desire to change. But there's still some traditionalists out there that are starting to turn the page, especially after COVID. But we really need to we do need to take risks, and we need to take calculated risks. But we need to be able to fail fast and safely. Oh, and of course on that note, I think a headwind could be just the risk aversion, because there are a lot of things that could cause you to, as a innovator, as a health system, say, gosh, that's really way too risky. And that could have some detrimental outcomes. And I think we have to watch out for that. So
definitely. Yeah. So on Data Pioneers on our show, one of the things that we love to do kind of to foster a creative and a collaborative environment is we always ask, so like, where do you go for information, right? Where do you books, podcasts, industry events, like what are some of your favorite sources of information?
So I do love to go to small, group meetings, if you will, with my colleague CIOs across the country. There are a number of big events out there. I won't name them. I don't want this to be an advertisement. Those are really interesting for sure. But I find that, having 10, 15 of my colleagues in a room, and we're talking about our challenges and problems is just really a great way to not only sort of have peers who have the same challenges and you don't feel so bad, you're not sobbing because you feel like you're the only one, but then you end up figuring out, how do you sort of address these challenges?
Misery loves company. Right?
Misery loves company. Exactly. I love reading a lot of different books. I just mentioned Clayton Christensen. He's one of my favorite authors in the space of innovation. I love the Heath brothers books. I mean, any one of their books, Switch, Blink. I mean, that Eric Blink was Malcolm, but Malcolm Gladwell is also a great one. And some of that just helps me sort of think broadly outside of healthcare, not so much, in terms of, figuring out how to solve a digital problem, but just sort of to think about structure and functioning. I certainly enjoy reading biographies. Like the most recent one I read was Dean Grohl's Storyteller. I don't know if you.
I haven't. I've heard of it.
Yeah.
So,
it has nothing to do with
highly recommended.
Highly recommended. It had nothing to do with healthcare, but what I love about that is it's just the journey that's that I think we've all taken, which is kind of you're meeting a lot of interesting folks, and you take a piece apart of that experience with them, and that sort of creates either a solution or a strategy, or it certainly becomes a part of who you are. And then I don't know, there's a bunch of podcasts out there. I think I'll do one shout out to my a buddy of mine, Keith Filioli, who he's a partner at LRV Health, which is a venture capital firm that really focuses on healthcare. But he does a wonderful podcast that interviews a bunch of CIDOs like myself, but also others, in government or in other industries, sort of talking about how do they solve problems? What are the the innovations that they see coming down the pike from a technology perspective? And it always comes back to healthcare, and so it's I really enjoy sort of podcasts that really focus on not just technology but everything around it to solve problems. So.
That's great. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. I'll
okay.
Add it to it. Yeah, that'd be cool. Well, this has been great. So is there anything else you want to cover? Like any projects you're working on, anything that you want to talk through that would be good to feature, shout out, anything like that?
So, at Hartford Healthcare, our vision is to be the most trusted and personalized coordinated care. And, that is the basis for my strategy, my IT strategy, because our strategy as a health system is really based on our vision as a health system. So the IT strategy is truly the enterprise strategy, but this notion of personalization and coordination, or what I like to call orchestration, to me is what we need to be doing in healthcare, right? So, to personalize something, you have to know the consumer or the individual that you're trying to personalize that something to, right? So it sort of, to me, speaks to the point that we have to harness our data. We have to be able to get all of our patient data and information, so we have good knowledge of the individual. When we engage with them, they believe that, and they feel that they're a part of our organization and that we care for them. The worst thing is that when you go to a healthcare system and they don't seem to know you, which is always the case, it seems, right? Because you're being asked to fill out the same questionnaire multiple times and answer the same question about you multiple times, right? So that's one part of it, is personalizing the experience, making sure that they feel like we know them. And then there's this notion of orchestration. What I like to think about is orchestration of the journey for the patient, whether it's a wellness journey or a chronic illness journey. And, at Hartford Healthcare, we have over 400 sites across the state, just as many services. We don't lack services. And in many ways, we don't necessarily lack the expertise on hand. We have all the expertise, probably in many ways, the best in the country, if not the world. But the problem is that we can't orchestrate all of those services for a patient. We can't say, we know Joel Vengco, and this is where he starts his journey. This is where his journey, sort of goes to, and this is where it could be in the next 5 to 10 years, right? We don't do that great of a job as a health system, as a health industry. So how do we do better with our services so we can ensure that, Rich and Joel and whoever else, they know where they're going to start their journey and how their journey is going to unfold. We know more about our car's journey than we know about our own journey, right? I bought a car and it tells me 5,000 miles, 10,000 miles, 15,000 miles. These are the things that you do. Now, you hit a curve, you blow a gasket, whatever, things might change. And that's okay, but it's an overlay on top of a journey that's standard. In healthcare, when somebody comes into the primary care office for the first time, we sort of say, hey, how you doing, Rich? And then you're off, and you don't even know what happened necessarily. You don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know when your next appointment is. Maybe it's the next year. But many of these health systems actually do believe that it's every other year for a healthy individual who's in the 30s. But we don't tell you that. We don't give you that sort of journey. So we got to do better at putting all that together. So we're focused in our division on personalizing the experience and orchestrating our services through the use of digital and data. And that's really, I think, what's going to be, our home run at HHC in the next several years, is to be able to have that kind of experience and that kind of orchestration for our patients, so that they know where, when, and how they can receive the proper services at the right time.
Yeah. So Joel, tell me kind of about some of the initiatives you're most excited about currently, but you're working on now.
So in order for us to personalize the experience and then also, orchestrate services around these patients, one of the things that we're focusing on is creating this notion of a membership model for our patients. And in that membership model, feeling or experience, we're intending to provide them a package of how it is best for them to engage with us. And in that package, there may be, and this is, we're still working on this, but this is sort of in design, there may be a technology in there that enables them to have a direct connection to us. I like to call it the digital first aid kit, or a care companion of sorts. Maybe it's akin to Alexa, but it's a direct connection to us, right? And of course, you could have peripherals in that package as well, that maybe help take temperature virtually, or enable you to take your heart rate or whatever it is, right? Some other peripherals that can help you just check on your vitals, help you be well, or even when you're sick. But this whole idea of bringing technology to our patients as members and families, by the way, is, I think, something that we're really going to be focusing on. Because you can put it on your app for sure, or on your iPhone or cell phone, but that doesn't create, I would say, direct engagement in the way that I think we're intending to do. And for example, when you and your kids go to Disney, and you're about ready to get onto that plane, a few days before that, you get a box, and in that box, you've got all these wristbands, and those wristbands have technology that enable you to do the things that you want to do in the park, but it makes you feel special. It makes you feel like a part of the experience. We got to do that in healthcare. And so that's one of the things that we're going to do. And embedded in all of that, like I said, the technology, we're gonna be able to provide them with all of the capabilities, now and in the future as we get them, so that they can be able to get our services through, through these digital means before they get into our health system physically, which we know eventually you're going to have to. We can't ever assume that healthcare is going to be completely virtual. It just won't be. It's a personal thing, and it means that we end up face to face with our patients, and that's what we're there for. But can we provide them with engagement on the virtual side, and that package hopefully is going to give us the ability to give them access to us anytime they need us.
That's really exciting stuff. I mean, I think that would be just create a totally different experience for healthcare in the U.S. So very exciting. Great. Well, Joel, thank you so much for being with us today. It's always such a pleasure to get together, and this was really great. So thanks again.
Thanks, Rich. It was my pleasure.